Morning, you're home.
Yep, I'm home.
You're back.
Actually, since last Sunday, yeah.
So was your trip wonderful?
Oh, I had a great time, yes.
Very
Yeah.
good.
Really good time, and Colorado is beautiful.
It is. It's still, I think, the prettiest state that I've been in. I mean, Washington is nice, but Colorado has the mountains and they're so immediate, just such a range.
Yeah. Ah, there's Ani.
Yes. So where were you in Colorado?
Steamboat Springs,
Okay, right. All right. So from
kind of
north.
north central.
Yeah.
It's intermountain. Sometimes I forget that the mountains are halfway across the state already. So it's halfway across the mountain area.
Yes. Good morning, Ani.
Good morning. So I'm coming in after you said what you said, but you've been in the Rockies?
Yeah, I was visiting my sister in Steamboat Springs, and that's where I called you from last week.
Have you been to Estes Park?
Yes, but never over the divide there. I've never been in Rocky Mountain National Park. Because
I have.
Oh, bye.
yeah, the one time my wife and I were there in Estes Park, it was end of November. So the road over the mountains was closed.
You're right.
No.
Right.
We were headed south on the Peak to Peak highway to visit my sister in her former home in Nederland.
Yeah.
Oh.
Netherlands, wonderful. It has the best rock shop.
Oh, rock shops in the Rocky Mountain National Forest. Oh boy.
Yeah.
It was great. And did you ever go on Trail Ridge Road? No.
In Nederland?
In the Rockies, in Estes Park.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so.
Trail Ridge Road.
We just hung out in town for a little bit, partaking of the local color, and then we went.
You go into the hotel?
No.
Oh, that's
no. We were
where Shining was done.
Yeah, Shining.
I didn't know what I was getting myself into when I went up Trail Ridge Road. The first place I could stop, I stopped and just cried. From tension, from the tension.
Hanging on the side of the mountain, is that sort of thing?
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah, I don't know if I've been on it then. I don't remember anything that catastrophic, but
yeah. The rock shops though were great.
Yeah.
I've still got rocks from there, geode and other things.
Yeah.
There are rock shops near me.
Yeah.
Seems to be a popular item.
yeah, no, people do like rocks. And sometimes the rocks don't like to move though, but we don't ask them often whether that's true or not.
Ah, that's what dynamite's for. Come on, Kathryn.
I love
Or a
rocks.
pickaxe, yeah.
Yeah, right here. I've got, oh my God. If I could, I've
Yeah.
got,
Wow, that's quite a collection.
just amazing rocks, and many of them from the Rockies.
I think I see some shells in there too.
Yeah, I got shells too.
Yeah.
I love these. It's God's artistry. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and I have rocks all over the house on windowsills and bookshelves. And I've got more than I have space for, so I have them piled in certain places too, in boxes and stuff.
So I guess we could agree. Minerals rock.
Yeah, there you go.
Right?
You get one for that. Nice, nice. Yeah, well, I was just scanning Rupert Sheldrake's morphogenetic resonance, how nature has memory, and you know how things come together on their own.
Mm.
You know, and I think what I got from him a long time ago, if it's right, is well, I think it might be whatever we put our attention on. I don't where we put our attention has a resonance to forms.
Yeah, it creates reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the split particle and wave experiment.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, they shoot a proton. I'm not sure exactly what they shoot, and there's a hole, and it has to decide, and a split. It has to decide which side to go to, and they found that it's indeterminate until you look. The minute you look, wherever you look is where it's gone. And they've also done experiments. I was reading about that this morning or last night, where they've done experiments with that, where after that happens, somebody changes it. And that will change then where it goes. So you can literally change the past depending on what you see.
Yesterday, I spent a lot of I spent a lot of time in contemplation about attention, asking myself, and still am, because it's a curious thing. Where am I to put my attention? Because my attention is creative. My attention activates. Where do I want to put my attention? What wants my attention? What is the best? What would it be good for me to put my attention on? Because it's an activating energy.
You know, I'd like to speak to that a little bit.
Good.
I'll tell you a story. When I was starting out as a remodeling contractor, well, not the first time, but it's particularly the story is when I had moved back to New England. So some years after the first time I did that, but I was working on very old houses, some of them 200 years old, some of them, you know, only 100. All of them at least that old. And so I would walk in and I'd say, I have a blank canvas in front of me. So what do I do next? And I found out that there was always the next thing, always a starting point. And, you know, oh, well, I could pull this apart. All right, start doing that. And once I'd done that, it was obvious that, okay, there's the next thing. I mean, I have to work on that, or, you know, and once all that was done, so I haven't worked over here. So, yep, there's a point I can do. And so that was a very specific example of something that over the past 25, 30 years, I've begun to see is absolutely true all the time. You know, as long as I take the next step, whatever's obvious, it will appear to me, my consciousness will immediately fix on the step after that. Now, the thing is, if I plan and have all these things worked out, I'm not paying attention to what's really there.
That's right. Very good.
But what's really there will lead. So I know this to me, this was extremely important because, you know, throughout spiritual training of any sort, you know, God will lead the way, you know, so this airy fairy crap, you know, and it's like, but it's true.
That's right.
It's literally true. It's not God, it's life. You know, there's always a next step, but you've got to pay attention. Because if you've made up your mind, you know, plans, you know, a whole sequence of procedures, whatever, you're stuck. You're stuck in your own mind. You're not paying attention. So that's how I would answer that. And
Nice.
I'd like to hear your answer because I'm always eager to fill it out, you know.
I first became aware of this dynamic and capacity a few years ago when I was just when when I had something to fix and I didn't know how to fix it, but I knew I would be guided. I knew it would tell me what to do with it. And it is an unfolding. And I don't understand it, but I love it because I can do things I don't know how to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was my cancer journey.
Mm.
And I think that's how we play with the world. And so the world's kind of waiting for us to just do something, and then I can interact with you. But if you don't do anything, there's nothing I can do, you know?
That's right. And the word yesterday came to me as the passionate word of my life is engagement. I want to be engaged because when you're engaged, you don't need to know how to do something.
Right.
But it will draw you in. It will unfold. I don't understand it, but it happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why I want to be engaged in things because I want to learn and I want to be guided. And it's a natural capacity.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I've begun to think that it's the only natural capacity that when we get our minds involved, we're thwarting everything.
That's right.
So, so another story is very interesting. Visiting my sister. She's 83 and she's lost her short-term memory.
Oh,
You know, can't speak to 100%, you know, what percentage, I don't know. It seems pretty complete. So this is new to her. So we would spend 3 to 5 hours every morning getting through that. You know, like, well, what are we going to do? Did we plan anything? Well, we had 5 minutes earlier. We'd go through it again. 5 minutes later, you know, have we planned what we're doing today? Or, you know, well, we're going to use the car. My daughter is out of town. How are we going to get to, well, she left me the keys, so forth. And I'm putting something on here just from observation. And I don't know what her true experience of it was, but she had a lot of fear and confusion around that, as you might expect. And trust was
Huge. Yeah.
you know, was elusive. But in 3 to 5 hours every morning, it's mostly 3, we worked through all this. And we finally got in the car and drove to Rabbit Ears Pass, and we were walking. And once we were there, she would describe to me what was coming up. I mean, her mind was perfectly clear. It was no longer being encumbered by doubt or, you know, by worrying about what was next, because she wouldn't remember anyway. but she remembered where the path went, what we were going to encounter and what we were going to see. And, you know, it was, and of course we talked and had a wonderful time. And all this subsidiary crap just fell away because we weren't planning anything, which she wouldn't have remembered. I mean, it's, and you know, I'm not going to make light of it because it would be a very, very scary thing. But I believe that most of the way we use short-term memory is, in fact, it's been, what's the word, that it's been short-circuited so that we're not using it right. We're using it to set up everything that's going to happen in the future, when that's not the best use for it. You know, it's to keep track of things, great. You know, where did I leave my car keys? So, you know, which of course she'd have trouble with. But, you know, once you're in the flow, we had no problem. We had a great time. And she actually does live alone. Her daughter lives across the street. So, and she knows that she can find her daughter, or she has the phone number. So she hadn't lost everything. She does the crossword puzzle every day, just to show, you know, prove to herself, and she does it. She finishes it to prove to herself that the mind is working. It's just lost that one capacity that, in my observation, is what screws everything up. Forecasting and saying, well, I'm going to live according to this forecast because, damn it, it's mine. And the natural world is saying, well, you can try, but you're off course, buddy. You're going to have trouble. And you know, so it was very instructive to me being there with her in that way. And we had a great time, even though I must say it was very difficult for both of us, because, you know, she's still really having trouble adjusting, you know. However, I gained a whole new insight into what it's like to live with that, because my mother had the same thing, but I never spent 24 times 4 hours with my mother straight through. So 100 hours straight through without a break. I mean, we slept, obviously, but and it just was a whole different insight into what's going on. You know, I just pop in on her and I try to read her something, and I'd say, oh, where did we stop? Where did we stop? And she'd say, oh, it doesn't matter. I won't remember anyway. You know, I mean, it's that sort of thing. Whereas then she'd have a memory of, you know, when I was a little boy, and the mind still works. It's just, I think it's clearing itself out. I had that inspiration. I don't know how true it is. I'll have to check it further. But
what do you mean when you say the mind is clearing it out as it relates to? It's difficult to put terms to this.
Well, I can only, the horse taking its own bit and wanting to run away with it. If you're riding, the horse can move the bit into a certain place in its mouth if it's so inclined, and you can no longer control it. It won't feel the controls, and it runs away with you. That's what we do. We run away from what life is trying to guide us to, you know, in the sense that we were just talking about, in terms of doing remodeling construction, or, you know, just about anything, walking down a pathway, instead of being present, because my sister could be present, you know, it was just making the plans became impossible for her.
So you're distinguishing between moving according to plan and moving according to unfolding.
Yes. And I'm doing this is being worked out in my mind as we speak. So if you find fault in it, have no qualms about pointing them out, but I'm moving, you know, this is just coming to me that, you know, something really amazing happened between me and her.
I find insight in it, not fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, living with my daughter is a little like that, because she's not terribly, she's present intermittently, but she does not hold the memory of what's happened either. So there's a lot of newness, you know, everything is new. Oh, we're doing this, or we're going there, or we said we were going to do that. And it's like, oh, okay, 7 times. So it's just a very different way of being. And it, for me, it has made me very, very present in that I don't count on or depend on or assume what was past between us. It's just what is happening now. So I don't have expectations, even with promises and stuff, because they kind of, you know, and if I remind enough, that can happen. But it just keeps us present. Yeah, that's the only way to say it. You just have to be in the moment.
It keeps you in the flow.
Yeah.
Folding.
Yeah.
Which is life's way.
Yeah,
It's the way you engage with life. Otherwise, you're not engaged with life. You're engaged with yourself.
I keep returning to instructions I got at the end of 2019 from the universe to develop a practice in the unfolding now. You know, to I forget exactly the words right now, but to all of nature is just now. It unfolds. The wind comes and it does this. The rain comes, you know, it's just an unfolding. And to consciously develop a practice of living in process. That was the term. Living in process like the rest of nature. That was the term. Isn't that what we're talking about here?
I think so. I've found that a lot of planning feels weighty and distracting.
A lot of planning, yeah.
It really doesn't. I mean, I've got plans, I've got ideas, but they pretty much still unfold on a day-to-day basis. What I can actually do, what I actually accomplish, is not so much driven by me as by the inspiration. And when I'm moved to do something, then it works and it flows, and that's all fine. And I feel that's the engagement with life. And if I'm not moved, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't work. And even if I try, it doesn't work. You know, it doesn't have the legs that it should have. So yeah, so it shifts your timeline. Yeah, people ask me sometimes about what I've planned, or like the phrase isn't coming, but, and it's just, I mean, I have no answer. I can't tell you, because that's not where I am. It's just not what I'm doing. You know, it will all unfold in the proper time. And I have curiosities about things. Oh, I guess, you know, moving would be in that category. I really feel like we should move. I kind of want to move. Yeah, it's more I want to move than we should move, actually. And so I keep looking at things and making the efforts, but not having any attachment to the results. And so, you know, I do the motions but it's not connected yet. It doesn't really have feet on the ground, or the gears aren't really engaged. So we're just doing all this stuff. And sometimes it feels like, you know, it's just like too much. It's not there yet. And I don't really need to pay attention to it at this point in time. So yeah, kind of go in and out of that.
Yeah, this diffuseness is sort of ever present in our diffuseness, you know, of how you describe what you're doing. I mean, case in point, you know, people ask, well, what are you doing now? And it's like, I don't know. It's so rich and full.
Yes, it's not empty. That's
but
for sure.
Where do you begin? I mean, okay, you know, currently I have something I can pinpoint. Oh, I went to Colorado.
Yeah.
Ears perk up, you know, it's like, okay. But generally that isn't the case. Terry and I live here, and things happen, and it's wonderful. There are people flowing in and out all the time. There's plants growing and, you know, producing, being beautiful in the garden, and we go up there regularly, you know, to do what we need to do. And the cat comes in and out of our experience continuously. And what else is there? You know what I'm saying? Because everyone had, you know, used to bother me. We went to Europe, and, you know, this sort of thing. Of course, I began to see through that when I found out that, yeah, they're talking about something they did 3 years ago. This is incarnate. It's like, why are you holding on to that?
I find in my own situation, in living alone in low-income housing community of seniors, that I have to bring in something new sometimes. Like my prayer yesterday was like, I want to be engaged in something that requires interaction, that requires an unfolding.
Yeah.
I have to do that, or I don't have that, and it's hard to live in process in the unfolding now moment, which are my instructions. if there ain't nothing happening.
No, I mean, I can hear that, and it's absolutely important to be part of a community where things are happening. So my point was that I don't necessarily remember all these connections, but yes, I mean, you know, the neighbor invited me down, and I, you know, use this little pole chainsaw, I cut down branches for them, and then sat and talked for, you know, that's happening all the time because we're just interrelated. And we've encouraged this, you know, we take walks, we see friends. None of that is something you would report at a cocktail party. I mean, you know, but it's absolutely essential to life. It's what life is when it's lived to the fullest, as you're just pointing out, Ani. I mean, you have to have that kind of interaction.
Yeah. So at this point of the conversation, I just want to go back to the originating thing about when you don't know how to do something, just follow the lead. it will show you the next step. I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I find that in everything I do. I mean, even you know, looking at houses and stuff, things just show up. And I can, you know, I look at it and do I want to take the next step? And what would the next step be? I just went through a thing where we actually I saw something. I asked to visit it, discovered that they had offers on it, that I had to move quickly if I wanted to do anything. I looked at the house. It was at the top of what we could afford, and it needed a lot of work. And so I figured out how we could do that. And I put in an offer based on that. And it didn't happen. And before I knew it didn't happen, I was really clear that it shouldn't happen, that I had not considered something which was going to make it really difficult. And I didn't want that stress. It wasn't worth it. And then I was told we didn't get it. So it's been just really interesting to go through, because it's the first thing I've seen that would work for us, with one exception. And the one exception was a very steep stairs that my daughter would have to go up and down, but she would have a bathroom on the top floor, so she wouldn't have to go up and down for the bathroom. So that's a blessing. And that's something that she wanted. But it would have required, I mean, the whole house needed to have the drywall finished and be painted, like every room. So that's not our work. That's not anything I'm doing or my daughter's doing. So it would mean finding somebody, getting an estimate and managing that job, and then paying on 2 places probably for 6 months while that happened. So it was all these things, you know, because I'd seen most of it, but I didn't see 2 pieces.
Yeah.
And when I realized I didn't see 2 pieces, it was clear that would not work. And so it was fine. So it was a learning experience that I wouldn't have gotten any other way. I needed to do that in order to do it. So that's part of the process. It's not, there's nothing wrong or bad or fault or any of that. That it didn't work out is the way it should have been. And had I pushed it, you know, I was thinking about this because the current market where it's so competitive, where if you want a house, you're going to have to pay a lot of money. You're going to have to put that money up. Several people had cash. So this is talking several $100,000 that they had cash to put down in this house, which I didn't have. I'm financing. And so as a buyer, where would you go? Cash, financing, cash, financing, cash. I mean, why wouldn't you do cash? And do I want it enough to put that kind of effort and risk into my life right now? No, I don't. It's just not worth that kind of effort. And that's the line, you know, between where you're with the flow and where you want to push the flow, where your little ego or your desires and your plans supersede what's being actually offered in front of you. And it takes, I think, a long time to be able to finesse that line, especially when you're younger, because there's so much drive and so much feeling that you have to accomplish and competitiveness and all of that. It really pushes you to overextend. And our whole culture does that. I mean, that's the marketing stuff and getting credit and all that kind of stuff is pushing your, I mean, credit is all future stuff. There's nothing present about it at all. So it's all a future problem. So we're designed that way. So it's really hard to step back and be in the moment and be appropriate for that time and place now, instead of in your head about where it should be in the future or what you're hoping to, all of that kind of stuff.
Well, what did you mean when you said we're designed that way? Remind me of what you were saying.
Well, I think the culture is designed that way.
The culture. That's
Yeah,
very different
yeah.
than we're
So yeah, well, it really pushes people to be that way. So you're trained, is
Okay.
maybe a better word, to be in that space, in order to keep that progress going, that forward momentum. I mean, we're not allowed to just sit and enjoy or appreciate. I was in another conversation and we were talking about, she's working with Scotland, with her part of her organization in Scotland. And this is the We All group, and they're very much about regeneration and all that. And the Scotland group has sort of become its own thing. It's gotten its own 501c3, it's raising its own money, it's doing its own thing. And they're being pushed by the government to come up with growth plans. And she said, we don't do growth. That's not what we're into. And so how to reframe that because of that drive, how to use an Aikido way of shifting that energy into something that, because you're not going to stop it requires huge amounts of energy, and it's a diversion. I mean, it's not a productive place. So you got to take that energy and move it in some kind of way. And what would be the conversation that would help that? So we were playing with that. The idea of going deeper and getting better at what you're doing now, as opposed to making it bigger or being more elegant and refining and doing those kinds of things as a drive for improvements, for a betterment, but not the growth thing, which is measured by larger numbers and bigger this, that, or the other thing, to try and take that.
So what I hear you saying, if I can verbalize it, is the difference between quantity and quality.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Quality.
Yeah. To refine and improve the quality. Yeah. Yeah. And to pay attention to that and to make those the numbers you're looking at, those the measurements that you're looking at,
Right.
instead of the expansive stuff that we're into. So using less becomes a huge goal, something that you can really use numbers for. Numbers are the deal. You can measure over time, but it really pushes you to do a lot of deep stuff instead of the surface stuff that when you're just doing bigger and better.
The qualitative experience that cannot be measured.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yes,
I
it's getting a
love
lot of flack for that at this point in time, because they've taken so much of the green things they were doing and the regenerative things that they were doing, and they've gotten caught into this growth cycle again, and so they're starting to greenwash.
But I want to return to your image of Aikido. Use that as a verb, to Aikido something. I used to think that Aikido was reactive.
No.
And it's not.
Responsive.
It's, well, even more than that, it's, well, responsive in the sense of maintaining the flow of energy.
Yeah.
So you use, the flow, instead of fighting it, you use it in the natural, continuation of that flow in a direction that you feel is, that you take agency in providing.
Yes.
And it's, I mean, that works all throughout life.
That's what we were talking about, really. It's that dance with life.
I mean, okay, my career, I've danced around getting an architectural license for years. And I've always known how to dance around it. Until finally, I mean, I was very close to following the exams, to completing the exams, passing everything. And then suddenly realizing that if I were to bind myself into that framework of being an architect, legal framework, there were a lot of things that weren't going to be possible anymore or change. And I did a risk analysis and just realized, so in a sense, I am talking about planning, and as you did, Kathryn, you know, assessing,
Yeah.
looking at what's there in terms of the house. That's a part of planning. It isn't that all planning is bad or unproductive, but it's a matter of, are you Aikidoing it, or are you setting up a rigid item in front of you that you're going to push like hell to make sure it happens?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with plan. I mean, I just wanted to cover this piece again, because there's nothing wrong with planning. I draw plans, but it's how you get there, and then how it's even, you know, carried out.
Yeah.
During the construction process, and how it's carried out even by the homeowners who have, you know, hired, you know, in their living process as they adjust to the new work and continue their lives. And yeah, it's a very different thing than just building a building. Yeah, it's a process. It's not a thing.
Exactly.
And
That's
the
the key word, process. It's living in process. It's doing what you do in an unfolding process like the rest of life.
right.
And that was my instruction that I keep trying to remember in my daily whatever. It's all, I mean, I'm at peace. I'm doing good when I'm living in process like the rest of nature, in the unfolding now moment. Whatever is, you know, flowing with the unfolding.
Yeah. Now this is very difficult to teach.
Well, and it's hard.
I've confronted it for years. I mean, you know, teaching the way I do architecture or the way I did construction, you can't. You know, you have to have someone just work alongside of you and see what's being happened. You know,
Let's play with the word attitude here. Let's use the word attitude. It's the attitude with which you approach. I mean, it's an attitude of, I don't know that that's the right word, but living in process is an approach.
Flexibility comes up for me as a piece of it. And flexibility, I'm in a bunch of groups, and several of them are looking at governance. So when you think of governance, I mean, try that. That's then the engagement of what kind of structures can you have that will allow for flexibility. I read a beautiful article the other day, and he was talking about a thing called mesh governance, where the different
say that again.
Mesh, MESH.
Mesh governance.
Mesh governance. So that's where the different aspects, let's say state and federal. State has certain responsibilities, federal has certain responsibilities, but over time those may change, or there may be certain things about one that need to shift to the other. And how do you do that? How do you allow for that flexibility, for that flow, for that process, and be more attached to the process than you are to the structures you create to make them happen, which is one of the catches in invisible structures in organizations, in groups of people, because we want to make rules, we want to create structures. And once we've done that, we want them in stone. We don't want to think about them again. We want to just function within them. And that's not how life works. You know, things change, that things happen, you get new understandings, new stuff comes in, and you've got to respond to that. So we do that by adding incremental bits and pieces. And then after a while, what we've got is a mess. We don't have a clear structure because it's been adapted in all these different kind of ways. And so nothing really works. But we don't understand how to keep that flow, to keep that process as a living thing instead of the dead thing that we make structure become. And yeah, and especially at scale. I mean, that's really hard. So it's really an interesting challenge to think about.
It's also difficult at the level of the HOA,
Yeah,
Homeowners Association.
yeah, yeah.
But we've been having some success where openings are constantly left and then somebody steps in, you know,
Mhm.
surprise. Oh, can I do this? Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
but you just graciously say, oh yeah, please do. But that flexibility, being open to the flexibility.
leaving the hole though is really
process.
the important piece,
Yeah,
because
Is it-
without the hole, there's no place for somebody to come.
holding the whole in
Yeah,
consciousness,
yeah,
right?
instead of wanting to fill it.
Nice, nice.
Or even feeling, I mean, the worst part is that someone feels like they've been forced to fill it because nobody
Sure.
else does. What that
Right.
really means is it's not being done the way I want it to do. So therefore I'm being forced to make sure it happens the way I want it to happen.
They want it to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's what happens throughout even federal government, as we've seen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're talking about a complete major shift in attitude, to use Ani's term. You know,
And a slowing down.
oh yeah, much so.
Yeah, because you have to allow for the process to catch up with the need.
Patience.
Yeah,
I've been holding on to one principle. I hold on to one principle. Don't know how I can, and it has to do with this. I don't know how I can sum it up that well, but it has to do with living in process. It has to do with the unfolding now moment. It has to do with how I think, how I process, how I define, describe whatever in a way that keeps me in a flow. Not in my head, but in an interactive flow with whatever whatever it is, whatever I'm looking at, whatever I'm doing. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but I'm just aware that it's the way we think that the universe is trying to shape, you know, to refine, to be more natural, to be more living in process like the rest of nature, since we are nature, living in process consciously, as a practice, as an approach, as an attitude. That's what I've been
And-
cultivating.
I think part of that, again, this came from this morning's reading. I'm just wishing I could, it's so hard when you read online, there's no way to go back to it. You know, things come up and then you're into something else. And I have no idea where it came from. But he was talking about quantum physics and all of that. And I suddenly realized that the way that is what dynamic stability is all about, is this allowing for flow. It's this emptiness that is there. There's a range of emptiness and it's just there. And when you get to the edges, then it gets filled in and you see where the edge is and then you move forward. It is not a single thing, and it has to have that flow. It has to have that grace in space to allow for what needs to happen. And it's always this open, vacuous place, but it's a range. And you kind of feel the range, you know, the edges of that. Or you can become sensitive to the edges of that. When you know you're getting to the point where you're not staying in the context, you're not keeping that shape. still, because it still has a range. It doesn't lose its shape. That's one of the curiosities of life, how things change and stay the same. So that change is within that range. As long as within that range, you can change and still stay the same. You get outside of that and then it becomes something different and new. So that understanding those edges and being sensitive to those edges, because I don't know that you can know them beforehand, but when you have to be sensitive, so when you reach them, you know where they are and stay within that. That for me is a really good explanation of goodness. Because goodness is a range. It's not something you do or you can put out there as something to as a rule or as a form that you fill. It has to be in relationship and responsive to the situation. Because sometimes being angry is actually good because it opens up a space for somebody, and other times it could totally crush somebody. So it's, you can't say don't be angry. That doesn't work. It's to be angry appropriately. Understanding the edges of that space so that you respond to them where they need to be.
That's quite beautiful. It's beautiful. You just define, describe, reveal your inner workings. It's beautiful. Beautiful.
Well, you've also just dived right into question I've been playing with for the last few days. At the book club last night, we were talking about a book called Demon Copperfield.
Oh, yes.
What's it called?
Demon,
Oh, yes.
not Copperfield, Demon Copperhead, you know, the snake.
Copperhead.
Okay.
And it's a play on David Copperfield, the book. And it was written by a woman who wanted to recreate the story in a modern sense, 1990s sense, in Western Virginia. So we had an amazing discussion last night, and it revolved around alternative facts. Now that's sort of been taken out of place, you know, when people are just confusing alternative facts with simply denial. But, you know, it's not a river in Egypt, no matter how much you think it might be. But this whole idea of alternative facts, what we came to last night is that everyone has alternative facts. They have a range, as you've just pointed out. I love that you brought that up. You know, that we relate to it differently. Our whole life substance is related to a certain, quote, fact, a truth we think differently. So we have alternative truths. There's no way around it. There may be factors that go above and beyond our consciousness, factors that have been set in the earth at a different time scale, like in a time scale, in a geologic time scale. I mean, what's happening on the earth is very quick, extremely quick, even though it's taking hundreds of years. It's very, very quick in that time scale. So even there's a range. It's an incredible range. And this is something, it's like what we were talking about all the way through, that nothing can be pinned down.
Yes.
And what that means politically is we have to very much take, you know, David Copperhead is about a certain component of society, sort of the Appalachian hillbilly, you know, redneck, you know, community. And we have to take that seriously. That it's not that they're crazy or, you know,
always a truth there.
that there's a lot of truth there.
There is. Yeah.
And they can live their truth and live very differently from someone who's living in the city. One of the best passages had to do with this young man in his recollection of his childhood. He's telling his whole story, and he's saying how he realized at one point, going down to Knoxville, that there was a big difference between the city and the country. And he said the city is governed by money and the country is governed by community. So it's just as difference can be. And so he said in the city, it all revolves around your job and then the things you can access because of your money and all these things related to money. But in the country, it has to do with the season and the animals and flowers that that are active at any particular time. It has to do with what's alive and available for food, and I can't remember all the details, but I was stunned by it, that it was just a clear Kingsolver. Barbara Kingsolver is the author. And I was just amazed at this description she came up with, because it could lie at the very center of understanding the divide that's occurred within our populace.
Yeah. Oh, it's a huge part of that. Huge part of that.
Huge.
But what you understand about that divide is where you get into trouble. That's where the alternative facts kind of come in.
Yeah.
I think how you make sense of that and the story you tell yourself about that truth.
And well, what you reach as your whole truth, and you're going to be totally inflexible about it. That's what happens. People lose their flexibility.
Yeah.
But the natural variation is absolutely normal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there. It's undeniable.
Well, and not only is it normal, it's rich.
And then there's that. I mean, I don't want to live in a uniform world. World. I don't.
It's not possible. It's not possible. I mean, there's just no way, actually. I mean, when you really look at how the world is created of all the individual cells making their own choices, it's not possible for anything to be the same. It is just not possible. And so really opening up to that and understanding how to work with that is just such a huge piece. We've done that historically in the Western world by trying to simplify things so that we've diminished that difference instead of embracing that difference to see what richness it adds, which is, I think, what we're being called to. If we can make that shift, that will open up things that we have absolutely no capacity to understand at this point. But the difference is key.
It's time for my favorite word to emerge. Autopoiesis. Self-making.
Yes.
Self-making.
Yes.
Well, then let me follow that with one of my favorite words lately. I've been doing this online course on epigenetics.
Epigenetics, yes.
And what it has to tell us is actually quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
I used to think of DNA as being something fixed. There is nothing fixed about it. Well, I can't say nothing. There is an original,
Yes.
pattern that was set when you emerged from the egg and were born. But from thenceforth, epigenetics is changing everything. It shuts down some genes, it opens up others. It is constantly shifting. Genes float, attached to various, catalysts, you might say, that they can float from one side of the band to another. In other words, those ACT genes can shift on the band. They're changing everything. So, and if it's a bad change, there are ways that the genetic environment cancels those things out and basically annihilates.
So that's the range, the dynamic.
What doesn't
stability.
work sets the range.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. It opens up exactly what you're saying. It is that range of absolute, anything can happen.
Yes.
And
Well, not anything, because there are limits. There's
within the limits, right?
yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and in that case, the limits are, if by any chance you get an abnormality that supersedes the limit, you die. That's cancer, or there are all kinds of maladies, but you die. So
Yeah.
So it is.
And we've been fixated on the edges, trying to make them solid instead of playing with the range that's inside. I mean, that offers huge opportunities if we would just play within it. And instead, we've been working to break the limits.
Yeah.
Instead of working within them.
I have a definition of epigenetics on my desktop that I open from time to time to remind myself. Epigenetics, the new science of epigenetics, emphasizes that the environment, and more importantly, our perception of the environment, control our gene activity.
Yes.
Yes.
Our perceptions of the environment.
Oh,
Or
that's where
attitude.
emotions.
Gene activity. Go ahead.
Attitude. I mean,
Emotions.
that brings in your attitude and emotion.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah. Emotion is just so key.
it
And
is.
you don't have to sit in it. It just has to happen, because it's like a message to everybody. This is how we're going to be. This is our approach to this. This is what that emotion says. So it can just be drops, but it has to be repeated to be effective. So things that you keep going back to are things that really are informing your form.
I just realized my second beloved word. My first one is autopoiesis. My second one is essence. Essence. Because it's the essence of whatever that things are really about. And somehow this definition of epigenetics, why did it bring the new science that our perceptions of the environment control our gene activity. And somehow perception and essence are mixed together inside of me.
Yeah.
Like core.
Good for me, not good for me.
At the cellular level.
Yeah. Nice.
At all of the cellular levels, because it's not just you. You got to remember, I just was reading this morning that 90% of the genes inside of us are not us.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 30,000 different critters in here that are all busy doing their own thing with no interest in what we're doing at all, no awareness even. But they get bathed in our emotions, they get bathed in our attitude, and they respond to that. Oh, yes, this is good. Oh, not so much. And it just, yeah.
I'm gonna have pizza tonight and all kinds of beer, and let's see how those critters react to that. Take that, critters.
Yeah. And then you feel it, don't you?
Oh yeah.
It's not like that's invisible to you. You will definitely know.
Look, I gotta get going. It's been an hour. I gotta move some neighbors giving us a bunch of hostas. So my wife and I were gonna
I love hostas.
go claim them and bring them
Bunch of
over,
what?
plant them. Hostas, the type of little plant with flowers. It's very nice.
Yeah, it's mostly leaves, but they get really nice purple flowers, light purple, lavender flowers. Yeah.
We have a perfect place. It's in the shade. and we need something to cover it. So
Nice.
Are they all green or green and white?
they're green and white.
Oh, nice. Yeah, because that brings color and lightness into the shade. They're great.
Yeah. I mean, they had a tree that covered these plants. The tree contracted a deadly parasite, was dying. So it was removed the other day. And now the hostas need to be saved because they'll wilt and die in the direct sun.
Yeah, they don't like it. Yeah.
So Terry and Robert are springing to the rescue.
Yay. Go to it. Go for
Here
it.
I come to save the day.
It's been delightful. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
wonderful.
you. This is very good. See you next Friday.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you, folks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.